There is a massive deep secret surrounding Enies lobby, and I'm gonna get all the way to the bottom of it with you today by the end of this video, finally uncovering what is really going on here. And yes, I do mean literally to the bottom of that massive chasm here. That's right. Enies lobby isn't just a great arc, some might even say the best arc in One Piece. It is also maybe the single most mysterious location in the entire story and has insanely deep roots going all the way back to the time of Nika, the time of Joy Boy, and could have been one of Oda's greatest pieces of foreshadowing ever. And huge surprise here, it has to do with the Harley text from chapter 1138 and the super cool mural that we see on Elbaf. And today we're gonna focus on the right side of the mural here, you know, the segment that seems to depict the first world of the Harley text. And this, in case you don't know, is the section that probably details Nika's arrival, how he liberated the slaves, and the wrath of him and the Hellflame Serpent that plunged the entire One Piece world into darkness. And that totally sounds like Enies lobby to me, right? Right? Okay, I'm just messing with you here. I haven't gotten to the fun and juicy details quite yet, but what I really want to focus on here is actually this right here. Oh, no, not that part. That's the Loki Ragnar stuff I was talking about a few videos ago. Also cool, but editor, can you go a little bit to the right here? Okay, you're getting closer. Actually, we'll come back to this thing in this video as well because it's important, but no, that's not it. A little bit down. Oh, okay, cool. Perfect. This is the one. Okay, what we see here is a massive hole, nice, that goes deep down into the earth, creating what appears to be an almost endless pit that Enies lobby, you know, kind of looks like it could sit on top of that pretty easily, I think. And I mean, come on, look at that. That's a great, like a really nice hole. And this thing has always bothered me for my entire career for a ton of different reasons. First off, what even are the physics behind this supposed to be? Like, why is there what seems to be like an endless waterfall in Enies lobby? How does that even work? Like, the hydrodynamics of this are kind of all over the place, but I think I've discovered how the Harleyan mural may actually help us finally decipher a lot of the questions that we have left about this place. And so by the end of this video, you will have a way better understanding why the world government most likely decided to set up shop at this weird specific location. And I gotta be completely honest, dude, this was one of my greatest theory problems for many years because there wasn't anything in the series that tied to this weird place until now. You see, both Eket Island and Elbaf may both have provided two answers for what is going on with this pit, and in fact, I don't think they're two different answers, they're the same one, but you know, Oda gave them to us in two pieces. And I'm convinced that the truth behind this chasm and how it was made are incredibly important to the series at large, to its ending, and something also tells me that Luffy and the crew may have to return to this location at some point in the future. And it does tie to this section of the mural, and yes, that little spaceship thing as well, but okay. So I've been a little bit cryptic about the origins of this thing, so instead let me just, you know, go put my cards here on the table and really show you what we're working with here. Because I actually believe that it is, in fact, the former site of this Forbidden Sun harvesting factory that we see depicted in the mural on the bottom right here, and that it was also created by the ancient weapon Uranus. Now, that part might not feel like a pretty big deal to you, as plenty of people, including myself, have talked about how the Enies lobby hole shares a remarkable amount of similarities to the massive pit where Lulusia once was. I can't find it on a map anymore, but believe me, it is a big deal. Okay, just look at them side by side here. They're twin holes, two big chasms in the ocean that seemingly fall into nothingness. Which actually leads me to another mini theory about the abyss that the Holy Knights seem to use that I'll get, you know, to in just a moment here. But first, let's look at the facts. Enies lobby is full of a bunch of geological features that straight up make no freaking sense. First off, this island is reared by plenty of whirlpools and one of the mysterious gates of justice, which are these giant unexplained structures made by the world government between their biggest strongholds. Now, the island itself is just floating, I guess, on top of this, you know, pit, and is just connected by the Bridge of Hesitation and the small bit of landmass to the front of it. And then, have you ever bothered to actually look at the residential structures that we see on Enies lobby? Like, these things are totally different in design from the marine buildings like the courthouse or the day station that we see. Their color is completely different, their design is much older and beaten down, and a very rudimentary design in general. You know, it's funny, they actually kind of look like they belong much more alongside the buildings on Zou or Shandora. funny coincidence, but not to me. These buildings seem specifically designed by Oda to be way older looking than the government buildings, and yet somehow they are still surrounded by a massive gaping hole that most likely was created by using an ancient weapon. So, what could all of these things here have in common, and what could it all mean? Well, I think that it's pretty clear if you're a One Piece history nerd that these are all things connected to the ancient kingdom. Good job. Now, Zou is on the back of Zunisha, the home of the Minks, a race that we see depicted on the mural from chapter 1138, fighting alongside what appears to be Joy Boy. Obviously, there's the fact that Zunisha heralded in Luffy's big transformation into Joy Boy by proclaiming that Joy Boy has returned with the sound of the drums of liberation. Then, on the other hand, we have Shandora, a city populated by the Sky Races who, you guessed it, are also once again depicted on both halves of the mural here. Shandora, by the way, a place where we first learned of the Sun God and the other three gods, and it's part of the arc where Luffy strikes his very first Nika pose in the story, and it's also incredibly deeply connected to the oldest and most ancient things that we have in One Piece lore. And so, isn't it very convenient that Enies Lobby, which we now know most likely is the result of the ancient weapon Uranus being used to create a massive hole in the ocean, shares architecture with ancient civilizations like Zou and Shandora? I mean, it just kind of seems to me like Oda really wants us to draw this connection and point to the world government setting up base on this very spot for a very particular reason. And I think that this reason goes way further back than just the era of Joy Boy. This massive Enies Lobby pit right here was the only one that we currently knew existed prior to what happened to Lulusia Island. And again, let me bring you to the main point of this video. There is a massive hole in the mural that clearly was used to extract something from deep down within the planet at some point during the original first world. The pulley elevator here and the depiction of slaves or people going into the earth and bringing out sparks seem to indicate that something big is going on here. So I've personally now come to the conclusion that these two holes are one and the same. It's just something that occurred that made the mineshaft or structure that was previously here collapse and flood. And now this entire idea originally came to me because of the fact that at Enies Lobby, it's always bright and day, which at first is such a crazy and like nonsensical thing, but might make sense if the Forbidden Sun is literally located right here below the earth. And with a massive hole below it, the island always having access to sunlight could now suddenly make sense. I'm actually insanely curious if Lulusia potentially is gonna be eternally bright now as well. But then also, seeing as the light doesn't actually seem to come out of the hole, instead I do think that this choice may have been a very intentional choice by Oda to hint at its true purpose. While the light itself may maybe not come from the dark abyss below itself, it is specifically framed above it, indicating that this location has something to do with the Forbidden Sun. We just didn't really know that it existed yet when the crew was first on this island. And well, I'll just spare you the theatrics here. We know exactly what that was because Vegapunk confirmed to us that at some point during Joy Boy's era, the world was once again flooded and buried everything underneath the waves. But now we can actually go one giant step further back because we can see that before then, before the era of Joy Boy even, there were super advanced structures and civilizations with crazy advanced technology that were also destroyed as a result of probably Nika and the Hellflame Serpent, because according to the Harley text and the mural here, we do know that Nika and this serpent monster thing depicted helped envelop the entire first world in darkness. And seeing as the One Piece world is pretty much in a completely flooded state, I do think that this destruction that Nika and the serpent caused could line up really well with the idea that I've proposed, that the world flooded not just once, but at least 2 times in the past. And well, it kind of starts to help me paint a picture of what may have actually happened during these big void centuries and earlier battles in the One Piece history. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you might remember a video I recently put out talking about how I'm very confident that the Forbidden Sun, or the Eternal Flame, whatever you want to call it nowadays, is located deep below the crust and inside the core of the One Piece planet. Based on the mural, it does look as if the ancient people of the first world had an operation set up to harvest it, which then aligns with the text saying men touched the Forbidden Sun. And the idea here would be that Emu, or like his predecessor, previously either gained access to the Forbidden Sun by using Uranus to blast a hole into the earth, or that possibly someone who made the ancient weapons had already left this hole, and then Emu maybe just went inside or discovered it when they were obviously not supposed to. Now personally, I think that either option really works here, especially when you consider the language used to describe the ancient weapons. I mean, I've talked about this quite often before, but in the original Japanese of One Piece, the word ancient isn't actually used all that much when it's translated. Like, the ancient kingdom that we know is actually more accurately described as the Great Kingdom, and the world ancient is actually only used to describe the literal ancient weapons, making it very much seem as if these weapons even predate the Void Century, which again makes a lot of sense and probably were even created or first came into play before that during the First World period here. Now for me, this kind of points at the idea that these might not even be real weapons at all, but possibly just giant industrial sci-fi tools used to harvest things from the planet or straight up terraform it. And seeing as the First World seemed to be having a massive industrial revolution from how it's depicted in the mural right here, you know, we see all the pollution here and everything, I do think the idea that Uranus is actually a tool used to dig deep into the world makes a ton of sense, don't you think? Especially if this floating spaceship thing right here on the mural is a depiction of the very ancient weapon. It would be in the right place at the right time, and it would also be perfectly used to dig down to the core if it's the same weapon that Emu is using in the modern era to wipe out a kingdom like Lulusia, just that that was not its original purpose. Its original purpose was digging really big holes. And it's for that very reason that I believe that Enies Lobby may rest above the original entrance to the planet's core. And let me just cook here for a second, because I do think I may be onto something, because it seems to me like Emu, as the secret ruler of the world government, established a judicial stronghold on top of it as a way to guarantee that they'd always have access to that very chasm that they originally tried to exploit. And based on the designs from the mural of this king figure with the same crown as Emu and the demon, I personally don't think I'm too crazy to say that Emu probably is much older and was very much relevant as a character in the old ages of the story as well. This shadow demon thing and the king here have elements like the crown, the menacing design that Emu has, and considering that all these figures are framed as the enemy in these eras, at least what it looks like to me here, I think that makes a ton of sense. But it isn't all just hypothetical or loosely connected evidence today, don't worry. I mean, sure, all these things line up pretty well and make sense, but I of course need to show you an actual motive here. I do need to prove to you why I think that Emu was the one who dug that pit in the first place, which actually should be the easiest part, considering the only person we've seen make a hole like this is Emu in the story, period. Because by using the Mother Flame that Vegapunk created to replicate the Eternal Flame's power, Emu appears to use an ancient weapon to wipe Lulusia off the map here, making the second ever ocean void pit thing, hole, whatever you want to call it. And in case you're wondering, to be completely honest, I do think that there are probably plenty more of these, you know, in the One Piece world, based on how much the ocean does seem to have risen thanks to Vegapunk's calculations. And the only reason I'm a little bit careful with, you know, stating for sure that it's Uranus is because technically we don't know that yet officially, but since we do know where Pluton and Poseidon are, and the fact that Vegapunk said that an ancient weapon was used to raise the sea level, you know, the way that this very pit did as well, I think it's pretty safe to say that it was Uranus, at least for the sake of this theory. And quite frankly, all of the Ekad Island arc kind of starts to paint a way better picture of how and why they would even want to do this. Now, I don't know if it's maybe because I've been rewatching the anime now that it's back, but I'm actively reminded of why Saturn, Kizaru, and the Marines even decided to come and invade Ekad Island to begin with, because it wasn't just to kill Vegapunk for learning the true history or to fight the Straw Hats. The mission was specifically to secure the Mother Flame, a piece of technology based on the Eternal Flame, which, as we learn in Elbaf, seems to be capable of powering some truly insane factories, machines, and society itself. At least that's what Vegapunk and this mural both seem to imply here, and seeing as Emu is the one in charge and also the one with a weapon that is powered by the Forbidden Sun, you and I both can see what's really going on here at this point. Because it really seems as if Emu is trying to regain access to the Forbidden Sun, something that they used to be able to access through Enies Lobby. That's why they're working on the Mother Flame, so that they can actually power Uranus to create another hole to the center of the Earth and finally regain access to this power source, something that they no longer can access because of the great floods that occurred. See how this all kind of nicely ties together? And I don't really think that the hole itself is the problem here, to be clear. It's still there, and it still, well, clearly goes very, very deep. I just believe that the pathway has now just been completely submerged under the ocean and cannot be used anymore since the infrastructure is full of water. I would say that there's a pretty high chance of this to be the case, that the Forbidden Sun doesn't even exist anymore, and that amount of water could have just straight up put it out, making it truly an empty pit down to nothingness. But then again, hey, maybe there is something that Emu could eventually do that might clear the flood, and that's why they patiently are waiting on top of a hole and digging new ones to finally go back down there. And this could actually tie really nicely into something I mentioned a little bit earlier, the Abyss. This ancient, dark, magic, demonic power that the Holy Knights and the Gorosei use seems to be directly attached to Emu and their goals. But also, whenever it's being used, these mystical dark flames appear, and Abyss is a very specific term and just literally means a deep and bottomless chasm. And in One Piece, we've now seen two abysses, the Enies Lobby hole and the Lulusia hole, and you can probably see where I'm going with this. I'm saying that way down there, the Forbidden Sun, there is a mystical fiery energy source, forbidden black flames. I don't think it's too insane to say that the abyss that the Celestial Dragons are actually using may straight up be tied to the Forbidden Sun and this hole, possibly using lingering bits of its power to travel across the world. And so the name Abyss may just straight up come from where it draws its power from, which is the giant hole in the planet that leads down to the Forbidden Sun. Now, just to play devil's advocate for a second, an argument against this would be that the Forbidden Sun and the Mother Flame are drawn to look light and whimsical, meanwhile the Abyss seems infernal and dark, but I do think that it's truly a matter of perception and artistic liberty here, because we don't actually see what the real Forbidden Sun looks like at this point. We just see how the giants decided to draw it, and the truth may be that the flame is much darker or much more evil in its full form, or maybe these dark flames show that the power is flooded and corrupted, not able to produce the same pure energy as it once did. And this of course would actually shift a ton of the ancient history as we know it, and based on just a silly little hole, I think that we've uncovered the narrative of the Void Century. Now, bear with me here, of course, I'm not saying this is 100% true, but I really think this makes a ton of sense and would be a really fun way for Oda to spin things if that was actually the case. Because the idea here is that the floods were not a result of battle or a mistake of Joy Boy's part, like, things seem to be framed by the poneglyphs and Emu. Like, I've even said this myself before with my Bing Sake theory, but no, now I actually think that Joy Boy used Poseidon and Pluton on purpose to flood the world as a necessary measure of burying the Forbidden Sun and taking it away from Emu. The giant demon that he's fighting on the left side of the mural, I think that is Emu using the Eternal Flame to do some really insane damage, and Joy Boy's alliance had to flood the entire world to prevent it from being completely used and accessible. That would explain why Joy Boy had issued an apology to the fishmen, because he could not bring them to the surface since, well, he ended up flooding the entire world. There was basically no more surface for them to go up to, not in his era at least. And when the world floods, of course society needs to end up moving upwards based on there being islands in the modern era, but outside of Wano and Alabasta, cities that were pretty high up on what used to be mountaintops. And I say this because we do know that the world flooded, and yet these old buildings still are completely intact and untouched. And that means that pre-flood they had to be way higher up on plateaus or mountains. And thinking of that, there was probably nowhere else for the fishmen to really go. And I really feel like we've been seeing and hearing about the ancient weapons' destructive potential for so long in a story, but it really hasn't become clear until recently just how insanely powerful they could really be. They can destroy entire islands in minutes and flood an entire planet, so this is something I'd probably go out of my way to disable as a power source if the person using them, was a destructive and evil king trying to rule the world. And so the only two questions remaining now are, what actually is this Forbidden Sun at the bottom of the pit in Enies Lobby, and what actually is Emu's plan if they get their hands on it, and what is the end game for them? What is their big master plan? Well, if you've watched this video, you should watch this one next to find out. It all ties together, and then, you'll also figure out what the Forbidden Sun could actually be and how it could be inside of the One Piece planet. With that being said, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks so much to all of our Patreons. You guys are fantastic. Welcome to everyone, who joined recently, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.